The strangest part wasn't what they said. It was how normal the afternoon looked. Sun coming through the kitchen window the way it always does on October Saturdays. The smell of the coffee I'd made without thinking, the same way I've made it for 31 years. The muffled sound of the television 2 rooms over, something about football scores, everything exactly as it had always been. And then I heard my name. Not the way you hear it when someone calls you, the other way, the quiet way, the way people say your name when they think you're somewhere else. I stopped moving, didn't even breathe, really. I was standing in the hallway between the dining room and the back bedroom, holding a stack of folded dish towels that didn't need to be folded again, but I'd been refolding them anyway because that's what I do when I feel like something is wrong and I can't name what it is. And I heard my son say, "Mom doesn't need to know the details right now. Let's just get the paperwork together first." The dish towels, I remember looking down at them, white cotton with a little blue stripe. I washed them that morning. I didn't move into the doorway. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there. And I listened. My name is Carol. I turned 62 in August. My birthday came on a Tuesday, and my son Marcus brought me a grocery store cake, the kind with the thick white frosting that's too sweet and leaves a film on your teeth. He was smiling the whole time, this boy of mine, 40 years old now with gray at his temples and his father's way of tilting his head when he's about to say something he rehearsed. My daughter-in-law Pamela sat next to him. She cut the cake very neatly into even slices. She always does things very neatly. I've lived in this house since 1993. Marcus's father, my husband, Robert, and I bought it the year after Marcus was born. We picked it because of the backyard, which has a big oak tree, and the kitchen, which has east-facing windows that fill up with light in the mornings. Robert died 11 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal, the way that particular disease tends to be. He was here and then he wasn't, and the house went from being ours to being mine, and I've been living in it alone ever since, which is something people seem to find very sad, but which I've mostly made peace with. I should say that I'm not a frail woman. I walk 2 miles every morning, rain or shine, down the road past the cemetery and back. I cook from scratch 3 or 4 nights a week. I drove myself to every single one of my medical appointments last year, including the 2 that involved minor procedures, and I drove myself home too, which the nurses weren't thrilled about, but which I told them was my business and not theirs. I have a small vegetable garden. I still volunteer at the library on Thursday mornings, helping with the adult literacy program, which I've done for going on 12 years. I am not confused. I am not infirm. I am not, as far as I can tell, someone who needs to be managed. But somewhere along the way, and I couldn't tell you exactly when, I started to feel like that was exactly what was happening. It began small, the way most things do. Marcus started calling more often, which I appreciated at first. Then I noticed the calls had a certain quality to them, a sort of gentle probing. How are you sleeping? Are you eating well? Have you talked to Dr. Hirsch lately? I'd answer, and then he'd ask follow-up questions in a tone that reminded me of the way you talk to someone who might not be giving you the whole truth. Gentle, patient, like he was humoring me. Then there was the visit in June where he walked through the house with a particular kind of attention. Not the casual way you move through a place you grew up in, more deliberate. Looking at the stairs. Looking at the bathroom. Looking at me going up the stairs, which I did perfectly fine, and then looking at the bathroom door, which he actually measured, with his fingers, as if calculating something. Just thinking about accessibility, he said when I asked him what he was doing. Accessibility for what? I said. He smiled that rehearsed smile. Just planning ahead, Mom, you know. I didn't say anything to that. I filed it away. Then there was the envelope. In September, about 6 weeks before that October afternoon, Marcus asked me to sign some papers. Financial stuff, he said, just to make things simpler going forward. He had them in a manila envelope, cream-colored, legal-sized, and he set it on the kitchen table with a pen on top and looked at me in a way that was a little too casual, if that makes sense. The way you look when you're trying very hard not to look like anything in particular. I asked what the papers were. He said it was a power of attorney document just to have on file. Standard stuff. So that if anything ever happens, I can help you manage things without it becoming complicated. Cat up the envelope. I didn't open it yet. Happens like what? I said. Oh, you know, medical emergency. If you can't make decisions for yourself for a while. I'm 61, I said. It was still September. 62 in a couple weeks, he said, as if that clarified something. I took the envelope. I told him I'd read through everything carefully before signing anything. He nodded. He smiled. Pamela, who was sitting at the table doing something on her phone, looked up briefly and then looked back down. I read the documents that night, alone, at my kitchen table, with a cup of chamomile tea and my reading glasses and the good lamp that has the bright white bulb instead of the warm yellow one. It took me 2 hours because I'm a thorough reader, and because some of the language was dense and I wanted to understand every sentence. It wasn't just a medical power of attorney. There was a financial durable power of attorney in there too. Broad language about managing assets, making decisions about real property, handling accounts. There was also a document that I did not recognize at first, but which, after reading it twice, appeared to be related to something called a living trust, specifically the kind where property can be transferred out of my name if I'm deemed unable to manage it. I sat with all of that for a long time. Then I put the papers back in the envelope, and I put the envelope in the drawer next to my silverware where I keep things I haven't decided what to do with yet. And I went to bed, and I didn't sleep well. I didn't sign anything. The weeks between September and October passed strangely. Marcus called every few days, always friendly, never bringing up the papers directly. But there was a pressure underneath the friendliness, like a hand on your shoulder that isn't quite gripping but isn't quite relaxed either. Pamela started coming by on Wednesdays, which she'd never done before. She brought things, a prepared chicken from the grocery store one time, a small plant another time, a casserole in a glass dish. She was pleasant. She asked about my garden. She commented on how quiet the house was, which I know she meant kindly, but which landed on me a certain way each time. It's a big place for one person, she said, one Wednesday in late September, standing in my kitchen, looking at the ceiling like she was appraising it. It's the right size for me, I said. She smiled. Of course it is. I've known Pamela for 16 years. She is not a mean woman. I want to be careful to say that. She is practical, efficient, a little impatient with ambiguity. She manages a dental office and she manages it well. She runs her home the way you'd run a small business, schedules, systems, a place for everything. She loves Marcus, I believe that. She's been mostly good to him. But somewhere in the architecture of how she sees the world, I have come to understand that she sees me the way you see an old piece of furniture you're not sure what to do with. You don't dislike it exactly. You just aren't sure where it fits anymore. I am not furniture. I thought about that a lot in those weeks, about what it means to become invisible in your own life, about how it happens so quietly, so incrementally that by the time you notice it, it's been going on for a while. Nobody makes an announcement. Nobody sits you down and says, "We've decided to start treating you as less capable than you are." It just starts happening. The tone of voice shifts. The questions change. People start talking about you in the third person when you're in the room. I remember the first time that happened. Marcus's kitchen, last Thanksgiving. I was standing at the counter helping with the green beans, and Marcus and Pamela were talking to Pamela's mother, a woman named Diane who is 2 years younger than me and perfectly sharp, but who speaks about older people in that particular way some people have, with a soft kind of pity built in, and I heard Pamela say, "Carol's managing well, considering." And Diane said, "She's always been strong," in the past tense, the way you say things about someone in a photograph. I kept chopping the green beans. Considering what? I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. I just kept chopping. Now it's October. A Saturday, football on the television, coffee already made. I had told Marcus and Pamela they could come use the house that afternoon while I was at the library. I had a thing, I said, a meeting with one of my literacy students. But my meeting was canceled at the last minute. A text from my student at 11 that morning saying she was sick, and I came home earlier than expected, quiet about it because I didn't want to make a fuss. And I was in the kitchen, and then I was in the hallway, and then I heard my name. Mom doesn't need to know the details right now. Let's just get the paperwork together first. I stood very still. Then I heard Pamela's voice, lower but clear. The real. Tor said comps in this neighborhood are up. We should move while that's true. Marcus again. I know, but we have to do this right. The trust documentation needs to be complete before we list. A pause, some shuffling, the sound of papers. Then Pamela, does she have any idea? Marcus, no, she thinks it's just the POA. Pamela, quieter, is that going to be a problem? A long pause, then Marcus, she'll understand once it's done, it's for her own good. I stood in that hallway for what felt like a very long time. There's a sound that silence makes when something has just broken. Not a physical thing, more like a register, a frequency. The air in the house felt different. The light through the windows looked the same, but something about the weight of it had changed. I was still holding the dish towels. I noticed I was holding them very tightly. I thought about walking into that room. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to walk through that doorway and set the dish towels down on the table and say, simply, "Tell me what you're planning." That part of me, the part that is still Robert's wife and Marcus's mother and a woman who has never in her life refused to look at something directly, that part of me was ready. But I didn't do it. Not because I was afraid. I want to be clear about that. I didn't walk into that room because I understood, standing in that hallway with the folded dish towels, that I needed to know more before I acted. That acting from shock would only give them an advantage. That the best thing I could do right then, right there, was to walk carefully back to the kitchen, set the coffee mug on the counter, pick up my purse, and leave the house quietly through the front door. Which is exactly what I did. I drove to the park. Not the nice one with the walking paths, the small one, a few blocks from the library, with the old wooden benches and the pond that always has geese on it. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time without getting out. The geese were there, doing what geese do. The sky was that particular October blue that has some gray in it, the blue of a day that knows something is ending. I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that because I've thought about it since and I'm not entirely sure what it means. I didn't cry right away. What I felt, sitting in that parking lot, was something colder than grief. Something more like clarity. The kind of clarity that comes after a long period of not quite knowing, when finally the shape of a thing becomes visible and you understand that you've been sensing its outline for months without being able to name it. They were going to sell my house. My house, the house I've lived in for 31 years, the house where I raised my son. The house where Robert died in the back bedroom with the window open because he always wanted air. The house with the oak tree and the east-facing kitchen windows and the dish towels with the blue stripe. They were going to use legal documents I hadn't signed, or documents they hoped to convince me to sign, to put the property in a trust, and then they were going to sell it and presumably move me somewhere more manageable. A senior community, maybe. An apartment closer to them. Something smaller, something that didn't require maintenance. Something that fit their idea of what a 62-year-old woman's life should look like. Without asking me. Without telling me. It's for her own good. I sat with those words for a long time. I've been a mother for 40 years. I know what it sounds like when you tell yourself something is for someone else's good when really it's for your own convenience. I've said it myself, about Marcus, when he was small. I said it when I made him eat vegetables he hated, and also when I refused to let him quit things he should have quit. I know the difference between those two uses of the phrase, and I know which one I heard through the wall. After about 40 minutes, I got out of the car and sat on one of the wooden benches. A goose came toward me in that aggressive way geese do, and I looked at it steadily until it turned around, which I found unexpectedly satisfying. Then I took out my phone and called my friend Louise. Louise has known me since 1987. We met in a Lamaze class when we were both very pregnant and very tired, and we have been through most of the significant things in each other's lives since then. She's been widowed twice, which has given her a specific kind of toughness that I find extremely useful. She doesn't panic, and she doesn't sentimentalize, and she gives very practical advice. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which she is good at when she senses it's important. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Do you have the documents they gave you?" I said they were in the drawer by the silverware. She said, "Get them. Tonight, read everything again. Then tomorrow morning, you are going to call Richard Oakes." Richard Oakes is an estate attorney who handled her second husband's estate. She's referred me to him before for small things. "You call him on Monday," she said, "and you tell him exactly what you told me, and you do not sign anything in the meantime." "I know," I said. "Carol." "I know, Louise." "No," she said more carefully. "I mean, you don't have to move. You know that house is yours." I looked at the pond. The geese were moving in a slow, unhurried circle near the bank. "I know," I said, and this time I meant it differently. We talked for another hour. By the time I drove home, Marcus and Pamela were gone. The house was quiet and warm and full of late afternoon light. I walked through each room slowly, the way you do when you're reminding yourself of something. The kitchen, the dining room, the back bedroom. The backyard, where the oak tree was dropping its first October leaves onto the grass. I stood at the kitchen counter and drank the rest of the cold coffee from my mug. Then I got the envelope from the silverware drawer. I read every document again that night. I am not a lawyer. I've never claimed to be. But I'm an intelligent woman with a good dictionary and the patience to read carefully, and I've learned over the years that most people who try to use complicated language to confuse you are counting on you not reading carefully. So I read carefully. I made notes in pencil on a legal pad, questions, things I didn't understand, specific language that seemed significant. By midnight, I had 2 pages of notes and a fairly clear picture of what Marcus and Pamela had been planning. The financial power of attorney was the key piece. If I signed it, Marcus would have broad authority to manage my accounts, make financial decisions on my behalf, and, in certain circumstances, outlined in language that was deliberately vague, act unilaterally. The living trust document was designed to transfer my property into the trust, of which Marcus was named as trustee. Once the property was in the trust, he could theoretically manage it, including selling it, without my ongoing consent, depending on how the trust was structured and what conditions were cited. It was sophisticated. I'll give them that. It wasn't crude. It wasn't someone forging a signature or stealing from a bank account. It was the kind of financial maneuver that looks, on the surface, like responsible planning. The kind that older women in particular are often encouraged to accept without reading closely, because reading closely is seen as distrustful, as difficult, as not understanding how these things work. I understood exactly how it worked. What I also understood, sitting at my kitchen table at midnight with my legal pad and my reading glasses and my pencil, was that I had never been in a weaker position to push back and also never in a stronger one. I hadn't signed anything. My name was on this house. My accounts were mine. I had done nothing wrong and nothing foolish. I had full capacity, full legal standing, and 31 years of documented presence in this property. What I needed was time, a lawyer, and my own plan. I called Richard Oakes first thing Monday morning. He had a cancellation at 2 o'clock and I took it. I brought the documents, my legal pad, and a list of questions I'd added to over the weekend. His office was on the third floor of a downtown building I'd driven past 100 times without ever going in, wood-paneled, smelling of old books and coffee. The kind of office that feels like it has seen a great many things and is not easily startled. He read everything while I sat across from his desk. He read slowly, turning pages with a careful hand. I appreciated that about him. When he finished, he looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "You haven't signed any of this." "No." "Good." He set the papers down. "The financial POA as drafted is very broad. The trust language is also broader than most people would accept if they read it carefully. Were these presented to you with any explanation?" I told him the story. The whole thing, Marcus saying it was standard, Pamela's visits, the conversation I'd overheard. He listened, he made his own notes. When I finished, he said, "You have strong standing here. Your capacity isn't in question, there's no medical documentation suggesting it should be, and frankly you seem sharp as anyone I've spoken to today. The question is what you want to do going forward." I told him what I wanted. I wanted the deed to my house reviewed and confirmed in my name with no encumbrances. I wanted to draft my own estate documents, a real, clear will and a healthcare power of attorney that I designed, not one handed to me in an envelope. I wanted to understand exactly what protections I had under state law, as a homeowner, as a widow, as a person who had not lost her mind and did not intend to. He nodded. "That's exactly what we'll do." I felt something release in my chest, a tightness I hadn't fully named until it loosened. "One more thing," I said. I looked at him steadily. "My son is not a bad person. I want you to understand that. I love my son. I don't think he wants to harm me." "But," said Richard Oakes, "but love doesn't give someone the right to make decisions about your life without asking you. And being someone's mother doesn't mean you stop being a person with your own name on your own house." He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "That is, in fact, the most sensible thing anyone has said in this office in quite some time." Over the following 2 weeks, I did what needed to be done. Richard confirmed the deed was clean, the house was mine, no encumbrances, no existing trust, nothing to worry about on that front. He helped me draft a proper will, clear and specific, leaving the house to Marcus, but under conditions that protected it as a family asset and prevented quick sale. He drew up a healthcare directive in which I named Louise as my primary healthcare proxy, not Marcus. Not because I don't trust my son, but because I wanted a document that reflected my actual wishes rather than someone else's plan for my convenience. He also sent a formal letter to Marcus, careful and professional in language, noting that I had retained counsel and that no documents relating to my property or finances should be presented to me outside of that counsel's review. Marcus called me the evening that letter arrived. The call was different from the others, no football on in the background. His voice had a quality I hadn't heard in a while, something a little younger, a little less polished. He said, "Mom, I need to talk to you." "All right," I said. There was a pause. "You heard us, didn't you?" "Yes." Another pause, longer. "I should have talked to you, I know that, I thought." "You thought it would be easier if it was already decided." A silence. "Marcus," I said, "come have dinner with me on Sunday. Not Pamela, just you. Come have dinner and we'll talk." He said okay. He came on Sunday. I made pot roast, the way his father used to like it, with carrots and potatoes and a little rosemary. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, the same one he did his homework at when he was in school, the same one where we had 1,000 dinners and 100 arguments and at least a dozen conversations that mattered. He looked like himself that evening. Not the man with the manila envelope, not the voice through the wall. Just my son, 40 years old, with his father's nose, and his own particular way of going quiet when he's uncomfortable. I put a plate in front of him and sat down across from him. "Tell me," I said, "what you were actually worried about." He was quiet for a moment. Then he started talking, not the polished version, the real one. He'd been having dreams, he said, about coming over and finding something wrong. About me falling and not being able to call for help, about the house getting to be too much, about the stairs, about the drive home from the library on winter nights. He'd been carrying this low-level fear for a couple of years, he said, and he hadn't known how to talk to me about it, because every time he tried to bring up something related to aging or planning he felt shut down. I listened to all of it. "Do you remember," I said, when he'd gone quiet again, "when you were 17 and you wanted to drop out of track? And I made you finish the season." He looked up. "Yeah. You were furious. You said I wasn't listening to you." "I remember." "Were you right?" He thought about it honestly. "Kind of, both maybe." "Yes," I said, "both. I was right that finishing things matters, and you were right that you needed to feel like I was listening." I looked at him. "This is the same situation, except this time you're in my seat." He held that for a moment. I saw something in his face shift. "I should have asked you," he said, "instead of just making a plan." "Yes." Pamela thought it was better to. "Marcus," I said it gently but clearly, "I didn't raise you to let someone else make decisions for you about your mother. That's between you and me." He nodded. He looked down at his plate. He picked up his fork. We ate together. We really talked for the first time in a while. About the house, about what I actually needed, about what made sense. I told him about my will, about the healthcare directive. I told him I would agree to a home evaluation for safety modifications, grab bars, better lighting on the stairs, but that I was staying in my house. My house. He listened this time. He didn't try to redirect me or explain my own life back to me. At some point during dessert, apple pie, which I'd made that morning, he said, "I'm sorry, Mom, I really am." I believed him. "I know," I said. "I want to say something. About what happened after, because I think this is the part that doesn't always get told. The aftermath of a thing like this isn't clean. It doesn't wrap up. Marcus and I talk more honestly now, which is good and also sometimes uncomfortable in the way that honesty is. Pamela and I are cordial, more careful with each other, which I think is probably appropriate. She knows that I know. She's never brought it up directly, and I haven't either, because I've made my point through action rather than argument, and I find that to be the more lasting approach. I had a conversation with my neighbor, Evelyn, who is 74 and lives alone and whose son in Phoenix calls once every 2 weeks with questions about whether she's managing, and I told her what I'd done. About the lawyer, the documents, the specific language to look for. She listened very carefully. She took Richard Oak's number. 2 weeks later, she called me to say she'd had her own papers reviewed and found that something in a trust document she'd signed 2 years ago was more limiting than she'd understood. She's having it revised. I don't tell you this to make myself sound heroic. I tell you because I think it happens more than anyone says out loud. This particular kind of slow erosion, the one that happens in families, the one that feels like love because sometimes it is love, the one that moves in with its paperwork and its worried voices and its very good intentions and its absolute certainty that it knows better than you what your life should look like. It happens in kitchens and dining rooms and hallways. It happens while the football is on. It happens in manila envelopes with legal-sized documents and pens left on top. And if you're not listening for it, if you've gotten used to being the one everyone else is listening at rather than to, you might not catch it until it's already quite far along. I caught it because I was holding dish towels and standing in a hallway, and something made me stay very still. It's January now. The oak tree has lost all its leaves, and the yard looks different in winter, more open, the sky visible through the branches in a way it isn't in summer. I had the grab bars installed in the master bathroom and on the staircase landing, not because Marcus asked me to, but because I had them assessed and they make sense, and because there's a difference between making your own choices and refusing to make any. I also had a locksmith install a new lock on the front door, not because I was afraid, but because I felt like it. The house is mine. It was always mine. It will be, in whatever legal and emotional sense those words hold, mine until I decide otherwise. I walk every morning. 2 miles past the cemetery back. Some days it's cold enough that I can see my breath, which I've always found oddly cheerful, the visible evidence that you are alive, that your body is warm, that you are generating heat as you move through cold air. I still fold dish towels. I do it when I'm thinking. I don't know that I'll ever stop associating the smell of clean cotton with that October afternoon, standing in the hallway, hearing my name said the wrong way. But I've come to think of that moment not with anger, not anymore, but with something closer to gratitude. Not for what was being planned, I won't go that far, but for the fact that I heard it, that I was paying attention. That something in me, the same something that walked 2 miles and read legal documents by lamplight and called Louise and sat across from my son with a pot roast and said what needed to be said, that something did not go quiet. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the betrayal, not the paperwork, not even the resolution, which was imperfect and ongoing, as real resolutions tend to be. The part I keep coming back to is that moment in the hallway, standing still, listening, not yet knowing what I was going to do, but knowing, with the particular certainty you feel in your chest rather than your head, that I was going to do something. That whatever was being planned in the next room, it did not belong to them to plan. It was my life. And I was not done living it. I think about other women sometimes. Women my age who might be standing in their own hallways, holding their own folded laundry, hearing something that stops them cold. Women who have been so long in the habit of arranging themselves around other people's plans that they've almost forgotten they have plans of their own. Women who have heard the phrase, "it's for your own good," so many times from people who love them that they've started to wonder if it might be true. I want to say this clearly, in case you're one of those women. Your name on a deed means something. Your signature on a document means something. Your presence in a room, even a quiet presence, even a still one, means something. The fact that you're older than you were means exactly as many things as you decide it mean. And not one thing more. Read the documents before you sign them. Talk to a lawyer, even a single conversation, before you agree to arrangements that rearrange your life. Call your Louise. Sit on the bench with the geese. Give yourself time to feel the full shape of what's happening before you decide how to respond to it. And if someone tells you that something is already decided, that the details are being worked out, that you don't need to know right now, stand very still. And listen. The dish towels are in the drawer, the coffee's on. It's a Tuesday morning, and the sun is coming through the east-facing windows exactly the way it does, the way it's been doing since 1993, the way I hope it does for as long as I'm here to see it. I'm going to fold the towels. I'm going to drink my coffee. I'm going to walk my 2 miles. And then I'm going to come home. To my house,